filled with the most wonderful humanity. And today we will begin with the conference of our Executive Secretary of ALBA-TCP, Jorge Arreaza. He will start with the presentation Principles of Unity as a Transforming Element. It is essential because yesterday we were mainly talking about life, about how we can work together to preserve our humanity. So today we will begin working on what the Secretary has asked us in the agenda that within our peoples we need to build together so that we can preserve our existence. Always understanding that what we are facing, what we are taking on as peoples, is the struggle against a system that predates our lives, which is capitalism. We thank our speakers, the personalities, our comrades who were joining us here yesterday and they were sharing their experiences and the actions that we will take to go from a state of reflection to a permanent state of action. So today we have an ideal space to concrete the actions of the peoples with regard to this alternative. We are only minutes away from starting the event. We will await for the arrival of our executive secretary and we will begin the activity. You will repeat the information that I gave at the beginning. The accreditation will continue after lunch for those who were not able to be accredited this morning. And at noon, as we finish the event, we must evacuate the hall. We give a round of applause to our executive secretary. We will start with him. Our first presentation of the day, the principle of unity as a transformative element. Thank you very much and welcome to the construction of a better world that is possible. Let's do a quick sound check. Apparently the mic is not working. It's more volume. It is important for us to know if you can hear it. Can you hear me? You have the floor, Mr. Secretary General. Good morning. We have had to make some adjustments because President Maduro will be here later, and so we're taking all the provisions. This morning we're here to talk about unity. And talking about unity in the left movements, in revolutionary movements, has always been a very difficult issue. Today is April 19th. We are commemorating 211 years since the Venezuelan people decided to be free on April 19, 1810. There we saw the first referendum in the history of our America. It was in the Bolivar Square. Back then it was called the Major Square. We were under control. The Captain General from Spain, in the face of the crowd, who were reacting to everything happening in the Iberic Peninsula that was invaded by the French. The king had abdicated, and the Venezuelan people took advantage of these circumstances to be free. And the Captain General Vicente Emparan decided to consult the people of Caracas if they wanted to keep him at the head of the country or not. And the people of Caracas, with a Catholic priest on the back, was making a sign with his hand, and the people said, no, we don't want you anymore. And he said, well, if you don't want it, I don't want it either. So he took his back and he left. And then came the war, then everything, the worst happened, but April 19th was the key for July 5th, 1811, which was our independence. But on April 19th, also gringos got what they deserved, and they ate sand in the Hiron beach. And there is no doubt that these facts also mark the future of the Cuban Revolution and all of our revolutions. April 19, in 2018, the Nicaraguan people was able to defeat the imperialist attack that almost led them to a war, to a confrontation. And also on April 19, in 2013, 11 years ago, we saw the arrival to power of President Nicolás Maduro, formally elected by the people. And today I want to talk to you about ALBA, because we feel that ALBA is a great platform, the great geopolitical and popular contribution that commanders Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez have left as a legacy for the peoples. We met with ALBA movements 3 days ago, and I told them, take hold of ALBA, empower yourselves with ALBA, because ALBA is not only for governments. Governments are in ALBA as a consequence of the movements of the people toward that direction, but you in the world, we see people from Africa, had a very hard time coming here, coming from Europe, from North America, and from our America, from Asia, and you need to take on ALBA, as Bolivar said. Bolivar is here in a very particular form for these times. Bolivar is not only Venezuelan. Bolivar is not only great Colombian. Bolivar is only from our America. He belongs to the peoples of the world. Take him in your hearts and in your minds. Bolivarian Alliance for the peoples of our America. Bolivarian Alliance. It is there that we need to be very clear about the significance of Bolivar, because Fidel, and he was a great Bolivarian, it will be very hard to find someone that is more Bolivarian than Fidel. Maybe Martí, maybe Sandino. And what was Sandino's plan? It was a plan for the realization of the supreme dream of Bolivar. That was the plan that Sandino presented to the world. So Bolivar wanted to leave this clear. We have the spirit of Bolivar here in ALBA. It goes beyond the 10 countries of ALBA, beyond our America. And probably we have made some mistakes when explaining this. ALBA cannot be something just in an office, in the foreign ministry, or a summit that it's held every 2 years with presidents. We cannot think about ALBA only as the terms of our declaration, of the principles. Yeah, it felt a little funny. I was talking about the principles. We need to take hold of ALBA as if it belongs to the people. In our house, we need to talk to our children about ALBA, about Bolivar, about our possibilities and our future. So we need to look at ALBA from a different perspective. Now, I will show you here my presentation on the screen. Please, the next slide. Sometimes a little tricky technology. Well, what I wanted to say is that our continent, in the case of our America, which is the first one that is impacted by ALBA, we have this historical confrontation. Monroeism, we didn't want to include the picture of James Monroe because in Quincy Adams was the Secretary of State. But this is represented by imperialism. It was born and it was present during our independence processes. Yes, the United Kingdom of Great Britain was a great empire back then, and we were fighting against the Spanish Empire in our lands. But the United States was already sabotaging the Amphitryon Council of Panama that was convened 200 years ago. Look at this quote, and then I will give you the dates. Our current federal limits are not too big for a good government, nor the increase of votes in the Congress will produce a negative effect. On the contrary, it will exhaust the small divisions that we have currently. And this is the essential part. Our confederation must be considered as the nest from which all of America, the North and the South, the North and the South will be populated. But we need to be careful to believe that it is interesting for this continent to expel the Spaniards. At the time, those countries are in the best hands, and I only fear that they will be too weak to keep them subjects until our population has grown enough to take them back piece by piece. This was said by Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. And this didn't happen in 1823, which is when James Monroe took to the American Congress this doctrine. This happened on January 25th, 1786, 10 years after the independence of the United States. Less than 10 years, 9 years and a half. They were already saying that their only concern that they had was whether Spain would have the capacity to preserve those colonies in their hands so that they could take them back little by little, piece by piece. So this is a dispute that we have. If we look at the OAS, that is the tool of the Monroe Doctrine. That is the tool of the destiny of the US. This is anti-popular. It is the tool for the application of the Monroe Doctrine. Therefore, before this Monroe Doctrine, before the FDAA, which was proposed by the Summit of the Americas, which is the highest level of the OAS, we created ALBA. And this emulates the Liberator in his spirit, in his projects. And even if CELAC is the great idea of all of America united from Mexico to Patagonia, Chilean and Argentinian Patagonia, we cannot think that simply because it exists, this is the dream of the Liberator fulfilled. Because CELAC without the spirit of ALBA is not the dream of the Liberator. It will be only one mechanism for the integration of countries within this system. That is why we need to be insurgents. We need to rebel, and we need to take this to the rest of the mechanisms of unity and integration with this Bolivarian alliance. This is what I was saying. I cited it, but not so much. Insurgent is to rebel. And who are going to rebel? The peoples. Where some elites also rebel. We already lived that in Venezuela with the guarimbas. The people, the young people from the bourgeoisie, all white young people trying to overthrow the governments. But the ones who can succeed are the peoples when they rebel. Sometimes it happens spontaneously, as in 1989 in El Caracazo, but they should be guided by the leadership of the governments and the peoples themselves, with their movements, their organizations. You, all of us, are those who are going to guide, who are going to direct this rebelliousness. Remember the case of George Floyd in the United States. There was rebellion in a big part of the United States, but who was the leader of this? Who had the agenda, the program? Who was directing this alternative? There was none, and the system was it completely shut off this process, and it completely stopped. So we see some of our leaders, Maurice Bishop in Grenada, national hero of Grenada since last year, Tupac Amaru, Jose Marti, Vicentino from St. Vincent and the Grenadines with a great history of freedom to tell, Miranda, O'Higgins, maybe Sucre, San Martin could also be included, of course. Nestor Kirchner said in 2005 in Mar del Plata, he said, they will not come here to kick us. He was telling this to George Bush and to satellite countries of the US back then. And in this regard, when this Mar del Plata summit finished, when the FTAA could not be imposed to our countries thanks to Chavez, thanks to Mercosur and the countries of Mercosur, there was Lula, Evo, Nicanor Duarte, the Kirchners, of course, Nestor. And thanks to them, the FTAA was sent to hell. And then ALBA emerged. And we are going to look at it very carefully. What is this about? Here we see some of our presidents happy. They look happy. But see, Hugo Chavez was overthrown in 2002 during 47 hours. Rafael Correa, it's been very difficult for him to come back in Ecuador because because of the lawfare and all the tools that they have used against him. El Sedaya, it was the first of the coup d'etats. And one of the causes they did this was because he was in the Great Alliance for the Peoples of our America. He was overthrown in 2019. Of course, we're not taking things lightly. We are not playing. We are fighting against imperialism. We are fighting against the Monroe Doctrine. This is a brief explanation of what I was saying. This is a simulation of an engine. The peoples are the fuel, are the engine itself, the energy. But the peoples need to be in contact with something, with the institutions, with democracy, with the democratic protestas, as Enrique Dussel would say, to be able to communicate, to be able to transmit their feelings and their democratic authority. And that driving engine is ALBA. ALBA, UNASUR, CELAC, the Andean community. All of those are gears. But if we don't have ALBA, we only have neoliberal projects that are not going to take us to our desired goal. So, in the rebellion of the peoples, we need to take hold of ALBA so that we can achieve our main objective. He, when it was signed in 2004, we had two countries. In 2001, it was only Chavez. Fidel was not invited to the Summit of the Americas. And on December 14, 2004, we had two, and then in 2006, there was Evo, and then Correa, and then all the Caribbean countries, and then the peoples took hold of this organization, and then we have Honduras in 2008, and then he left in 2009. He was taken out by imperialists. What is the objective of ALBA? To achieve integral development, to ensure social equality, and to guarantee the good living, the quality of life, independence, self-determination, and sovereignty of the peoples. And as you can see, we're not talking about lifting the tariffs or any of that. Of course, all of that can be present in a process of complementarity, but that is not the goal of ALBA. Our objective is not to negotiate an area of free trade with the European Union or with NAFTA in the US. Our objective is to achieve self-determination, to achieve our freedom, and to be happy with our needs satisfied. These are the countries, the governments that are currently members of ALBA. We are 10. Hopefully, we will be more very soon. But we could have 20, 30, and it doesn't matter if all these peoples are not there yet. We were talking to ALBA movements, and we were saying that it is necessary to build a method, and we will not do this from the bureaucracy of this executive secretariat or from the foreign minister office. We will only do this with you to activate the Council of Social Movements of the Bolivarian Alliance. I don't know where Joao Pedro is. There he is. Many of you were there in 2008 with President Chavez in Tintorero, the president of ALBA. Back then, Chavez said, we need a council of grassroots movements, but we were not able to activate it, but this is our challenge. And it needs to be a council with an agenda, with a program, that it can be a world social alternative. And this is what we're working on today, in the eve of a new era for humanity, with the principles of cooperation, solidarity, complementarity. We cannot start lifting the tariffs in ALBA. Because how can we do it? How can the Venezuelan economy compete with the economy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines? How can the economy of Antigua compete with other economies? We need to be complementary. We need to respect our asymmetries. We need to respect our economic realities and the laws of each country. And we are in the process to negotiate with ALBA-TCP. This was a contribution of the government of President Evo Morales, the trade agreement for the peoples, and President Diaz-Canel, President Arce. We are all working in a great TCP among the ALBA countries, where complementarity will be the essential element. Not just liberation for the sake of liberation. We need to have something that is going to identify us as a new type, as an economy for life. This is where we're going. The defense of cultural identity in Latin America and the Caribbean, the concept of multilateral positions with extra-regional countries. Trade and investment are not ends in themselves, but instruments to achieve sustainable developments. I remember an ALBA summit, Professor Aristobulo Isturiz, our teacher. Long live Aristobulo. He said, the social is only the strategic, the economic is the tactical. If we don't put the economy in function of social objectives, we are not moving in the right direction. Energy integration with Petrocaribe, for example, Venezuelan fuel for the development of the peoples, and maybe the Mexican fuel and the fuel of any country for the development of the peoples. the encouragement of investment with Latin American capital, respect for intellectual property, integrating development of telecommunications, transportation, sustainable development through regulations that protect the environment. And this is what I wanted to get to. We have a presidential council in ALBA. We have there the presidents or prime ministers, the heads of government of the alliance. Then we have a social council with the missions, the great social policies, the operations, surgeries that are offered for everyone who needs it, helps for people with disabilities, etc. Then we have the political council with the foreign ministers, then the executive secretariat, which is a tool to make the processes more fluid. The economic council, it is actually called Council of Economic Complementation. These are the economic ministers who gather to build the great policies. And then you see the Council of Social Movements. Our commitment is that the first time that we meet, we will be able to say, here we have the Council of Social Movements of ALBA-TCP. We have been created. We meet with our ministers and our presidents. On December 14, we will celebrate our 20-year anniversary of ALBA. And I hope that that day we can install that Council of Social Movements and to gather with the Presidential Council in Havana, Cuba to celebrate the 20 years of ALBA. Here we have some achievements. Milagro Mission, surgical interventions for the blind, 5 million, over 5 million surgeries, over 40 million glasses that have been given away. Program of attention for people with disabilities, over 1 million technical aids for people with disabilities, almost 5 millions of people that have ended literacy with the Cuban method. The child's heart uh, hospital that has planned surgeries for over 8,000 children. We have also sports games. We have airlines. For example, during COVID, Conviasa, our flagship airline, became the transportation of vaccines for the ALBA countries. When we were not able to purchase vaccines because of sanctions, it was very hard for us. But it was even more difficult for Dominica, for Antigua and Barbuda to be able to purchase those vaccines because they were being hoarded in the capitalist countries. So they wanted to give them the scraps of the worst vaccines, and today they have discovered that they have the worst adverse effects. So into those countries we sent the Russian vaccines, the Chinese vaccines, and they were able to contain the pandemic thanks to ALBA. Community doctors, the beauty of medicine in Cuba and in Venezuela is that these doctors are not trained to go to Europe. They are not trained to have a private practice. If you come from a small town, from a small village, you can be trained in Cuba and in Venezuela, and you can go back to your village and to your town to provide health for your people. We also have a fund for the attention of Eastern Caribbean countries. We have flights. For example, we opened the Argyle Airport, beautiful airport in St. Vincent of the Grenadines with ALBA, provided resources. Commander Chavez provided a big part of resources through the ALBA Bank for the construction of that airport, and now we have a flight from Venezuela to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This was never an idea, and the Liat airline that was financed by ALBA from Antigua and Barbuda, the objective is to join all the Caribbean countries to Venezuela, to Cuba, to Central America, to have interconnection, and we don't have to go through such hardship. I know some of you needed to board 4 flights to come here when you could have arrived in 1 hour direct flight. And ALBA is also articulating a great force to protect the Pachamama, to protect the earth. We reject the unilateral coercive measures. ALBA is a zone of peace, and that is why we need to guarantee this zone of peace so that Latin America and the Caribbean, as we say in SELAC, is a zone of peace. We also have a 2030 agenda. As you have this World Social Alternative, we also have a 2030 agenda for ALBA. This is the horizon that we are seeing. We will complement a dynamic, complementary, and fair relationship between the countries of ALBA. So we need to move toward that trade agreement of the peoples. We need to move forward lines of maritime interconnection, air interconnection, so that we can take our products from one country to the other. We need to have common purchases, joint purchases of everything that is necessary for our peoples. We need to have some deregulations in our economies. Some disconnections are also necessary. Some Caribbean countries need to be disconnected. But for this, we need to create the appropriate conditions so that we can connect to the ALBA mechanism and to disconnect from some other trade mechanisms that can be tied to the US. Then we have the expansion of the ALBA Bank. What I wanted to show you is that we have a plan, we have an agenda. People think that it is very ambitious to comply with this by 2030, but some people say that it is plenty of time. We need to get to the rhythm of our authorities. This is the architecture, and this was proposed for Latin America and the Caribbean. It was proposed for South America. We were not able to move forward for whatever reasons, but the Southern Bank is expressed as the ALBA Bank. Petro South is expressed in ALBA as Petrocaribe. The ALBA economic space used to be the great area of trade within our America that was created by our commander. Sucre was the common currency, but we were not able to create it. But in ALBA, we have the bank, we have the currency, and it will be reactivated with new modalities of crypto assets. And with this, we can even evade the sanctions imposed by the US if we do it in the right way. But if we achieve with this ALBA Bank to become the Bank of the South, and if Petrocre becomes Petro South, and if Sucre becomes the common currency or with any other name, then we would be planting the seed. We need to water this seed, and we will be able to get the fruits in the future. But this is the first movement of the gears to move this engine and to achieve all of this. By 2030, regarding the social aspects, we need to cover the needs of our people, especially for the most vulnerable populations. We include food sovereignty, the Miracle Mission, the strengthening of the Caribbean, mitigation and attention in case of natural disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, etc. And even with the climate changes is worse, now the small island development states are subject to all these consequences of climate change generated by the global north. Then social infrastructure, hospitals, schools. In principle, we can take this to all of our member countries, but Commander Chavez and Commander Fidel were thinking that the local governments can also be associated with ALBA. Even the mayor's office of San Salvador, for example, with Mr. Bukele, connected to ALBA, and he received resources from ALBA. Of course, he betrayed ALBA, but that is something different. In the mayor's office of Managua also did it, and it is possible. Dear ambassador from Mexico, it is possible maybe that some ambassador, some mayor in our countries could be in partnership with ALBA, and they are welcome to do it. We also include policies against illiteracy, medicines, etc. And in the political horizon, we would like to have ALBA as a moral authority reference with opinion and concrete action. We cannot go to the United Nations if we don't have our political position. We need to be able to discuss, debate, and negotiate among us our common positions. This happens less and less now. But with the Social Movement Council, this will not only be a common position of the governments, we need to listen to the peoples as well. What they're saying about the climate policies, in economic policies, trade policies, in social rights movements. That is why we need to have the complete, every piece of the puzzle with this Council for Social Movements. We also have a Congress network of ALBA. We could invite congressmen not from the member countries, because ALBA goes beyond the member countries, the original member countries. We have a network for the protection of social and human rights. We don't need to depend on the High Commissioner of Human Rights. Why do we need to depend on that, on the United Nations, if we can have our own mechanisms? And of course, I insist that ALBA should be the heart of CELAC. I insist upon this. CELAC can be CELAC, and we can say it in the speeches, this will be to take the project of Bolivar and the project of Sandino. But if it doesn't have the essence of ALBA, it will be just anything. Tomorrow it will be the new OAS. That is why we need to take care of it and to fill it with the spirit of ALBA. Culturally, we are very diverse. Our America is very diverse. Some people think that Latin America and the Caribbean cannot be looked as a unity, but we are convinced that we are a unity, not only geographically. There is a type of drum that is used here in a Barlovento. It's a very particular one, I don't remember the name. Our ambassador Jorge Guerrero in Grenada was mentioning this. He studies the Afro peoples and the African diaspora in the world. He is a researcher and he has been an ambassador in Grenada for 10 years. And he saw that in a small town of Grenada, they use the same drum with the same materials, with the same sound and the same rhythm. In the Caribbean countries, you can see that the British prohibited the use of drums. That is why they created the steel bands. They built these instruments with the barrels they used to trade. Because if they heard those drums, they would be reminded of Africa, of their origins. But we still see the drums in many other countries. We see the resistance, the cultural resistance of our people, and we can achieve even more regarding our thinking, our knowledge. With the global think tanks of the global south, we can move forward. And in the communications area, we have social media, artificial intelligence. Are we going to debate from ALBA, artificial intelligence? We do want to regulate artificial intelligence, and I see no problem with this. The genetic issues, cloning, we need minimum ethical codes regarding all of this. We need to regulate the new technologies. We cannot kneel before Elon Musk. Of course, we're not going to be dogmatic. We will be intelligent to use all of these technologies for good, for prosperity, for the evolution of our peoples. But we need to create this debate because it is not happening. Tomorrow we will see people with chips on their heads and we're still not debating about this. But here we have the drive of ALBA Digital, the communication networks, social media, TikTok, Instagram, anything. But the real communication among the peoples is from door to door, embrace to embrace, hand to hand. It is discussing things in person. We cannot put aside the real political work in every country. That is why communal councils and communes need to be the main players. And on Sunday, you will see our peoples within the territory that are creating their own government and they decide what the government is going to finance. It is not decided by the mayor, by a minister, by anyone, but by them. And as Stephanie said yesterday, I don't know where she is, but she was saying that organization is essential. Those who say who are fighting against imperialism but they don't believe in organization, this is a pure rhetoric. That's why I insist the media encouragement from Telesur, the radio networks in our country, the great multimedia platforms of ALBA that are going to communicate us with each other, information in English, Spanish, in many languages. If we strengthen all this, it is good, but we cannot stop working politically in every community. Against the artificial intelligence, we have the people's intelligence. This is the only way to do it. Next week, we will have a summit, a presidential meeting. I hope that a small group of you can stay in the country to give accounts to our presidents and prime ministers about this session of the role that we play in ALBA for the activation of the Council of Social Movements and the social alternative that we are proposing from this space. This is a new project, and VJ will go deeper on this. Vijay Prashad is waiting for his turn. The new document that we are presenting, apart from the general principles of the social alternative, it also includes concrete proposals for democracy, for finances, housing, well-being and social protection, work, health care, food, culture, women, sexual diversity, etc. So if we're not capable to agree upon a common agenda in these areas, we will not able to achieve our goals. It is enough of pettiness, enough of fragmentation. Here in Venezuela, before Chavez, people would say that the left-wing leaders were generals of division. And why? Because they had four parties in a meeting and then they would leave with seven parties. They would divide because they would blame each other for everything. But there is no time for that anymore. Unity is the only possible path. Paraphrasing Gandhi, unity is not a destination. Unity is the way. So we need to move forward, and to have unitary plans, we need to agree upon this agenda. What are we going to do with Haiti, for example? We are also worried about Palestine. Yesterday evening, there was a sort of fake campaign, fake news about Israel attacking again. But this could happen in actuality, and we need to fight along Palestine. But we have Haiti very close to Venezuela, 1 hour, 20 minutes away from Venezuela. How far is it from Mexico, from Nicaragua, from Cuba? And also, we know that if one opinion respects the Haitian people, is the opinion of the ALBA countries and the opinion of Venezuela and Cuba because of what we have done for Haiti. But of course, Americans create their own strategy, CARICOM comes in, and Haiti is a part of CARICOM. And they needed to be in these organizations so that the Americans would not impose their agenda. But we also need to be there as ALBA. I am sure that in the presidential summit we will see some proposals, but we will only obtain that if we have the Social Movement Council. Some people are demonized, some political actors, but we don't know if they're actual demons if we're not in the territory. And you are there. The grassroots The social movements are the only ones who can create a counter proposal to the imperialism proposal. Because when that proposal will be executed, it will be with troops. And what is going to happen in Haiti? We need to create a new proposal. And I would say that one of the main roles of the Social Movement Council should be a plan to liberate Haiti. Because Haiti is our debt. How much do we owe to Haiti? It was the first great example, the first independent republic, an Afro descendant republic. And the French did not forgive them for this. Haiti was the only country that had to pay a huge the debts. They had to compensate the French for their liberation. It was paid up to the end of the 20th century, you can imagine. But Pétion had no problem to provide ships, weapons, army, ammunitions to Bolivar to come and liberate our countries. Well, to conclude, in the document of the World Alternative, Social Alternative, we included this. Simon Rodriguez, the liberator's teacher. I think that Simon Bolivar and Simon Rodriguez were ahead of their time, at least 150 years ahead of their time. And he wrote this, and he says that the greatest fatality of men in the social state is not having with its similars a common feeling of what is convenient for us. A common feeling. That is our social agenda. That is our common agreements, our common feeling. ALBA should be our common tool, but we need to feel it. Consider yourselves members of ALBA, all of you. Take the flag of ALBA, the spirit of ALBA around the world with a common feeling, and I am sure that we can do it. We have no time to discuss anymore. The contributions of the presentations have been extraordinary, but we need to move to action with concrete agendas. Solidarity is not only in declaration, but in action. It is not only a protest, but the action. We need to do it. And we need that common feeling, that common agreements, clearly established. Let us invite everyone, as President Maduro said, unite everyone against the main enemy, paraphrasing Ho Chi Minh. With some, we will agree upon 80% of the actions. With others, only 50%. And with others, they will say, well, that agenda is too weak, is too conservative, we need to be stronger, but we need to agree upon a minimum to move ahead. And this is ALBA, an essential tool. Capitalism dehumanizes us. It isolates us. Capitalism, as Juan Carlos said yesterday, why are people not taking to the streets as they did in 2003 to protest against the war in Iraq, which we were not seeing directly? We were not looking at the dead children. We were not looking at their dead bodies being maimed. We were not looking at the mothers with the dead babies in their hands. However, millions of people around the world took to the streets to stop and try and stop this war in Iraq. Only similar to what happened at the end of the Vietnam War. But we're not going today to protest against everything that is going on. We need to do it because this is the project of the peoples. Thank you very much, comrades. I am sure that we will prevail. Long live the homeland. Homeland is humanity.
Thank you very much. Executive Secretariat, Secretary of ALBA-TCP. As a militant and moderator, I would like to cry, people united will never be defeated. People united will never be defeated. A big applause to people around the world struggling. And now we welcome Professor Vijay Prasad. We're going to listen to his presentation, Hyper Imperialism and a Social World Alternative.
Aqueles que precisarem de tradução podem também ir lá fora, procurar o receptor lá fora. Estamos prontos? Meus amigos da tradução estão lá atrás. Vocês estão todos lá.
We live in a very barbaric world. It's unimaginable, this barbarism. The barbarism that Comrade Jorge was talking about, the barbarism of apartheid Israel's genocidal war on the Palestinian people now, 20 years ago, the barbarism of US imperialism against the Iraqi people, an illegal war, actually, a violation of the United Nations Charter, maybe 2 million people killed, displaced, injured. Not one Iraqi family was untouched by that war. Now, in Gaza, at least 300 families have been wiped out from history. 300 families. Their family names will not carry forward. That is the brutality of the Israeli bombing. It's actually quite stunning how brutal this bombing has been. It's hard to explain to people who haven't been into a war zone how ugly war is. War is loud, there's a lot of noise. War in a modern period is ugly because a lot of toxic chemicals come out of buildings when they come down, and those chemicals poison generations of people. In Fallujah, in Ramadi, in Iraq, the United States used depleted uranium. Children are still born in Iraq with defects from that depleted uranium. That is the brutality, the barbarism of imperialism. That is the attitude of Monroeism, which Comrade Jorge talked about. Monroeism is barbaric, it's brutal. Sometimes the word imperialism doesn't capture emotionally how brutal imperialism actually is. How brutal, how barbaric, how inconsiderate it is towards the lives of ordinary people. The lives of ordinary people. 50,000 people probably already killed in Gaza. There are 7,000 people missing, of them 5,000 children. 15,000 children dead in Gaza. A generation lost. That is the brutality, the callousness of imperialism. We have decided in our text, hyper-imperialism, and I have a little postcard that you can have later, which has a QR code to go and read the text on hyper-imperialism in Spanish, Portuguese, English, and so on. We use the term hyper imperialism to capture some of that brutality, that barbarism. You see, the thing about hyper imperialism led by the United States is that it is dangerous and it is decadent. It is both dangerous and decadent. I want to spend a few minutes on this before getting into the alternative, because I think it's very important for us to recognize the danger and decadence of hyper-imperialism. Hyper-imperialism is dangerous. 75% of the share of global military spending is spent by the United States, its NATO allies, and its close NATO allies like Japan and South Korea. 75% of world military spending is spent by the United States and its allies. Comrades and friends, I want you to think about that. When people say, well, China is a threat, when people say Russia is a threat, what are they talking about? China is a threat. That's not a factual statement. China is responsible for 10% of world military spending. The United States and its allies responsible for 75% of world military spending. How is China a threat? How is Russia a threat? How is Venezuela a threat? How is Cuba a threat? There is only one threat to the planet now, and that threat is hyper-imperialism, a structure led by the United States and its close European allies. That's the threat. The only terrorist we have on the planet Earth is the US government and its close allies, including Israel. That's the terrorist. That's the only terrorist. That's the major threat to the planet that we face today. But it's worse than that. That's dangerous. That's why we call hyper-imperialism dangerous. But it's worse than just being dangerous. It's much worse than that. It's also decadent. It's decadent. Look at the people who are leading the West. Joe Biden, Olaf Scholz, Rishi Sunak, Emmanuel Macron. Not one of these people has earned the respect of the people anywhere in the world. How is it possible that these countries, with their immense wealth, cannot produce even one intelligent world leader? How is it possible that every single leader of the global north is mediocre, is absolutely unable to finish a sentence? You see, it's not about Biden's age. It's not about Biden's age. There are lots of people who are 80 years old, 90 years old, extremely lucid. It's not about age. It's not about Donald Trump's brutal manner. There are lots of brutal people in the world. They're not all like Donald Trump. It's not like Olaf Scholz, who we don't even see. When Olaf Scholz comes on a stage, it's almost like he's a shadow. He doesn't even exist. At least Angela Merkel had a personality. Olaf Scholz doesn't even have a personality. Emmanuel Macron, come on. What is that? How is France produced Emmanuel Macron, the country of the French Revolution, the country of the Paris Commune, the country of philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre? Europe is not producing philosophers anymore. There is no Hegel in Germany today. There is no Sartre in France. There are no real intellectuals being produced in the United States. The problem isn't the age of Biden, the lack of personality of Olaf Scholz. The problem is they don't have a project. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the dilemmas of humanity. They don't understand how you need to transcend poverty. They don't understand what it means to have a real project to educate our children for health in the world. We saw the complete collapse of the global north during the COVID pandemic. But before the COVID pandemic, after the financial crisis of 2008, from which they have never recovered, in that long third depression, we watch the global north struggle with things like homelessness, with things like racism, homophobia, and so on. They don't have a project. They don't have any fresh ideas. In that sense, they are decadent. They are not only dangerous, but they are decadent. Hyper-imperialism is dangerous, yes. They don't know how to build bridges anymore. They know how to blow them up. Hyper-imperialism is dangerous, but it's decadent as well. They can blow up the bridge, they don't know how to build it. They don't have the money to build it. Between 35 and 40 trillion US dollars sitting in illegal tax havens. They don't have the money in public hands to build bridges. They don't know how to build schools anymore. They don't know what education is anymore. They don't understand healthcare. The decadent aspect of hyper-imperialism is very important for us. It's important for us because they are trying to convince the world, because they don't have a project, that there's no future. They're trying to convince the world that what you have is what you have. What you have now is what you will have forever. Nothing can be improved. You should be lucky to have what you have now, because it can get worse. Still austerity, still cuts. You got a school, you should be happy you have a school. Tomorrow there may be no school. That's not a future. That's a permanent present. That might even be a giant U-turn to the past. It is because they don't have a project, they are decadent. It is because they don't have a future to offer for people. It's because of that there is so much hopelessness in the world. There is so much toxic energy. So many movements of the right wing. Movements of the right wing grow in an environment where there is no project for the people. For us, those of us who believe in the people, those of us who believe in the possibility of a future, it's not enough for us to just criticize hyper-imperialism. It's not enough for us to just criticize the danger and decadence of the world leaders in the global north. It's not enough to just criticize them. We are very good at criticizing. We are the best anti-capitalist critics. We know how to say no. We know how to fight them. We know how to say no to them. But if we want to build the biggest movement around the world, we have to have something to which people can say yes. We need to have a project. We need to have people feel optimism. We need people to be optimistic. We need people to be optimistic not only for the future, but we need them to be optimistic in our project. They need to believe that socialism is possible and necessary. It's not enough to say another world is possible. We have to say socialism is necessary. Not only is socialism necessary, but socialism is possible. You see, that's what we have to struggle with. Many people believe socialism is not possible. It's a good idea, but it's not possible. Comrade, you had your chance. Built the Soviet Union. Where is it now? You had your chance, comrade. It's over. Socialism was a good idea. Looks good on paper. It's a great idea, but you can't really do it in the world. People are greedy. People are greedy. How are you going to deal with greed? We have to convince people with a concrete project. With a concrete project, we have to convince people that socialism isn't just a good idea. That we know how to build schools. We know how to build a bridge. We can finance all of this. It's all possible. The money is there. Capitalism has developed enough. Now it's time to socialize capitalism. Now it's time to take it over. Now it's time to go beyond it. Now it's time to transcend it. Not only transcend capitalism, but transcend centuries-long problems that capitalism inherited and didn't solve, couldn't solve because of private property. Problems such as educational inequality, problems such as health inequality. Capitalism inherited it, but it doesn't know how to solve those problems. We know how to solve them. We have the ideas. We have a plan. We have a project. What's in your bag? This alternative social world, this imagination of an alternative world with its many different aspects. This is a concrete plan. It is achievable now. You see, people sometimes argue that you can't build socialism while capitalism exists. That's not true. You can make a start now. In fact, people already have. In fact, during the Soviet Union, they were building socialism. You didn't have to look at, inflated housing markets. You didn't have to live in a slum. There was housing for people. The Soviet Union achieved a great deal in its merely 70 years of existence. Look at the Cuban Revolution. The Cuban Revolution educated everybody. Sometimes I meet Cubans and I think, you are the ninjas of our revolution. You are from another planet. You are such dignified people, like our comrade Abel. He's a dignified rock and roller. Dignity. That's what a revolution gives you. The Chinese Revolution. The Chinese Revolution overcame mass poverty, absolute poverty. Look at the difference between India and China. My comrades are here from Nepal, Comrade Balram. Comrades are here from Bangladesh, Comrade Inamul. Comrade, look at what the Chinese did on our borders. They transcended absolute poverty. We haven't done that in the rest of Asia. We have been unable to do that. It was the building of socialism now that enabled them to provide housing for people, that enabled them to vanquish the COVID pandemic and so on. You don't have to wait for some later period. You have to start building now. In Venezuela, for instance, Comrade Jorge used to be the minister of the communes. Build socialism now. Build food sovereignty now. Build chains of food. So as the MST, Comrade João Pedro is there, 40 years of the MST, 40 years of the landless movement, building socialism now in the encampments, in the settlements, and so on, building agroecological food systems, feeding people. The MST sent 13 tons of food to Gaza because of their socialism. Comrades, we need you to read this text. We need you to read this text. We need your ideas, your suggestions. This is a plan, a program that ALBA-TCP, Instituto Simón Bolívar, and Tricontinental are producing only with your help. Without your inputs, this will be just a piece of paper. We don't want this to be a piece of paper. I don't need these papers. This is not relevant. If we don't put these things into action, what's the point of having them? There's no point having us draw up a plan, Jorge, correct? What's the point of having a plan if nobody does anything with the plan? We have to use the plan, build the plan with all your wisdom, all the wisdom of the movements that are in this room. Look at some of the points, see what has been forgotten, see what has been poorly drafted, and give us feedback. And once we have a plan that we are all proud of, let's go out there and campaign with this plan. Let's go out there to the people and say, we are not decadent. We are optimistic. There is a future. Your child doesn't have to be permanently illiterate. Your elders don't have to have no health care. We don't need rich people and their money making our lives miserable. We have to use this document not only for this or that reform, health here, finance there. No. We use this document to change people's understanding of our evolution so that people look at this document and they decide. There are two forces in the world. There's the force of decadence. We don't need the force of decadence. We have finished with the force of decadence. All that they have are bombs. All that they have is intimidation, the regime of sanctions, the regime of coercive illegal measures. That's what they are. They are dangerous. They are decadent. We don't need them. We need billions of people around the world to look at our project as a concrete way to reject the decadence. And not only reject the decadence, but embrace socialism. Embrace this project. Embrace the project that you are building in Venezuela and which we want to build around the world. Comrades, there are only two choices. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels wrote, either we advanced to socialism or we'll have the contending ruin of clashing classes. Either socialism or ruin. If you look at the world today, it looks a lot like ruin. Gaza is a place in ruins. 28 million tons of debris in Gaza. If you put all that debris into the Mediterranean, you can make a whole new Gaza. That's how much debris there is from this bombing. 23 to 28 million tons of debris. That's a ruin. That's what hyper-imperialism does. That's what hyper-imperialism knows. In order for us to get billions of people to reject that, they have to believe in us, not just reject that. You can't jump off a cliff if you don't have a parachute or if you don't have a paraglider. You can't jump off a cliff without a paraglider. This, comrades, is our paraglider. We have to make it together. Let this meeting be the first step we take, Comrade Jorge, where we make this project and start capturing the imagination of billions of people around the planet. Thanks a lot.
Muchísimas
Thank you very much. In this way, we close this morning. Now we are going to have lunch. You need to take all your papers with you, take all your things with you. We're going to have lunch, and then after lunch, we are going to have another session. Thank you very much.